I buried my first wife on a Tuesday. 2 years later on a Sunday, I buried my pride. That's what it felt like sitting at the head of my own dinner table surrounded by people who were supposed to be my family, while my new stepdaughter looked me dead in the eye and told me exactly what I was worth to her and to her mother. But before I tell you what she said, the words that cracked something deep inside me, I should tell you how we even got to that table in the first place. My name is Mike Harrison, and I've lived in Cedar Falls, Iowa my entire life. 54 years spent in the same small patch of the Midwest, working as a maintenance supervisor at the John Deere plant fishing, on the weekends, showing up to church potlucks, and trying my best to build an honest life after losing my first wife, Claire, to ovarian cancer. She died quietly in her sleep. I stayed awake for 3 days afterward because the house felt too loud and too silent at the same time. So when Lydia came along 2 years after Claire passed, I thought maybe God was giving me another chance. She was younger, funny, lively, in a way I hadn't felt in years, and she came with a teen daughter, Kayla, who was already halfway grown. I figured I could step in and help support them both. I wasn't trying to replace anyone, just trying to build something that felt like home again. For a while, I honestly thought we were doing okay. But then came that Sunday dinner. It was February, one of those brittle Iowa evenings when it's warm enough for the snow to melt, but cold enough for the wind to crack your lips. I'd spent half the day cooking a roast the way my mother used to slow with rosemary and onions until the whole house smelled like warmth. My brothers came by, a couple friends from First Lutheran, and Lydia's sister drove in from Waterloo. I even set the table with the ceramic dishes Claire had once loved. I told myself it wasn't strange. I told myself families blend eventually. Kayla showed up 40 minutes late. She didn't apologize. She didn't even take off her earbuds. She just breezed in wearing a crop top and boots that looked too thin for the cold. Lydia smiled at her like she was a celebrity walking into a talk show. And I tried to stay patient. We sat down, held hands for prayer, and I bowed my head. I heard Kayla exhale heavily through her nose, the kind of huff teenagers do when being respectful is apparently a full-time job. When I said amen, she didn't echo it. She didn't look up. She just smirked at her phone. I should have let it go. But people like me, old Midwest boys, we're built on manners. Respect isn't optional where we come from. So I said gently, "Kayla, honey, could you put the phone down during dinner?" She didn't even blink. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You're not my dad," she said. "You're just some old guy who fixes tractors and thinks a co-signed loan makes him family." The room went silent. My brother stopped breathing. My church friends looked down into their plates. Lydia's sister pressed her lips together like she wanted to disappear. I felt my ears get hot, then cold, then hot again. That sentence hit me harder than any bar fight I'd ever been in, harder than anything anyone had ever thrown at me. I opened my mouth to respond, to say something, anything that might salvage a shred of dignity, but Lydia was faster. She reached across the table, put a hand on her daughter's arm, and told her loud enough for the entire room to hear. "I told you from the start she already has a father. You're just the checking account with a pulse." My breath caught. It took me a second to understand the sentence fully, another second to realize she meant it, a third to swallow the kind of humiliation a man doesn't forget, not even at 70, not even on his deathbed. Slowly, I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped across the hardwood, the sound sharp and ugly. I stood up. I didn't shout, didn't grab my coat, didn't storm out. Midwest men don't do that. We hold our storms inside until they turn into something cold and quiet. "I'm going to get more iced tea," I heard myself say. But in truth, I just needed to breathe. I walked into the kitchen, leaned on the counter, and stared at the wood grain until it stopped blurring. A moment later, my older brother Rick stepped in behind me. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Mike," he said softly, "you okay?" I didn't answer right away. Rick had been with me through everything: the funeral, the empty months, the night I questioned whether I'd ever feel anything again. He'd warned me not to jump too fast into something new. He'd warned me I didn't really know Lydia yet. And now here he was, watching me crumble without saying "I told you so." "I'm fine," I finally said. The lie tasted metallic. He looked at me with those tired older brother eyes. "You sure you know what you're doing with them?" he asked. "You barely let yourself heal." I didn't have a good answer. I didn't have any answer, really. By the time I walked back to the table, the conversation had shifted to weather patterns and gas prices. Safe topics people use when they're trying to pretend something terrible didn't just happen. Kayla avoided my eyes. Lydia gave me a tight smile, the kind that said she expected things to go back to normal now. But there was no normal left. Not for me. Not after what I'd heard. Dinner ended. People left, coats were zipped. Cars pulled away. The house grew still again. Lydia washed dishes. Kayla disappeared into her room. I stood in the living room under the yellow lamplight, staring at the picture of my first wife hanging on the wall, the one Lydia always said she didn't mind, but I now suspected she hated. And something in my chest shifted. A quiet, steady voice rose up inside me. If I wasn't allowed to be her father, then I sure as hell wasn't going to be her provider. I went to bed early that night, not out of sadness, not out of anger, but out of clarity. The kind that comes right before a storm breaks loose. I barely slept that night. Not because I was angry, anger burns hot and fast. What I felt was colder, heavier. The kind of cold that settles in your bones and stays there. Around 3 in the morning, I finally gave up on sleep and went downstairs to make coffee. The house was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock Claire had bought at a flea market 20 years earlier. That ticking sound reminded me just how long I'd been holding this family together by sheer will. By the time the sun came up, I already knew what I needed to do next. Not out of revenge, not yet, but out of necessity. If I was going to step back from the role they refused to let me play, then I had to know exactly what role I was playing, financially speaking. I waited until Lydia took Kayla to campus, then grabbed a folder, my wallet, and my car keys. I told Lydia I had to pick up supplies at Menards. That was technically true, I just wasn't buying lumber. Instead, I drove straight to Blackhawk Credit Union. Now, if you've lived in Iowa long enough, especially Cedar Falls or Waterloo, you know the credit union folks by name. I'd been banking there since I was 29. The tellers watched me go. Gray watched my kids grow up, watched me walk in alone after Claire died. When I stepped inside, the place smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner, just like always. The same old wooden chairs, the same posters about retirement planning taped crooked on the wall. Familiar, steady, a place where things made sense. I went to the counter and the teller smiled politely. "Morning, Mike. What can we help with today?" "I need to review my accounts," I said. "All of them?" she asked, eyebrows lifting slightly. "Every single one." She led me to a small office and I sat across from a young guy I didn't recognize. He typed in my information and the screen glowed green across his glasses. "Okay," he said, "let's start with your checking." "No," I interrupted gently. "Start with anything new, anything opened in the last 2 years." His fingers paused just long enough to tell me he wasn't expecting that request. Then he clicked, scrolled, stopped. "Huh," he murmured, "that's odd." My stomach tightened. "What's odd?" "Well, there are several credit accounts here I'm not seeing history for. 2 Capital One cards," and he squinted. "Scrolling, actually 3, all open online." I stared at him, opened under my name. "Yes, sir, using your social security number." I felt something deep inside my chest go very, very still. He kept scrolling. Limit total around $28,000. And he turned the screen slightly. "It looks like they've all been used heavily." I leaned forward. "What were the charges?" He printed a sheet, a long one. When he handed it to me, I felt nauseous before I even read it. Louis Vuitton 2,480, Ticketmaster Coachella 1,119, Hyatt Regency Des Moines 687, Sephora 328, Airbnb Chicago $400, and on and on and on. Then the kicker. Nemrei de Tourney. Kayla Thompson Venmo transfers $200. I closed my eyes. It all made sense now. The constant packages arriving for her, the brand new designer purse, the hotel weekends with her friends she claimed someone else paid for. Identity theft. Committed by my own wife. Or at the very least allowed by her. The young banker cleared his throat. "Sir, have you filed any fraud claims yet?" "No," I said softly, "not yet." "Would you like to start I want to print every document linked to those accounts. And I want a full transaction history for all of them." He nodded quickly. "Of course, give me a few minutes." While the printer chattered in the background, I stared at the boring little office wall. There was a picture of a cornfield, a calendar with a tractor, a poster about protecting seniors from scams. All of it felt surreal. When he returned, he had a stack of papers an inch thick. "Is there anything else I can do for you today, Mr. Harrison?" I hesitated, then asked the question I didn't really want the answer to. "Is there anything else suspicious?" He clicked again, scrolled, then inhaled sharply. "Sir, there's also a joint account I don't think you opened." My jaw tightened. "Who's on it?" He swallowed. "You and Lydia Thompson." My full name, her full name, same account, thousands withdrawn monthly, and the notes on the account said it had been created online, without me. The whole room felt smaller suddenly. The air felt thick. "I'm going to need those documents too," I said quietly. "Of course." I left the credit union with a folder that felt heavier than bricks. The papers inside weren't just transactions, they were betrayals. Receipts for disrespect. Proof that the woman I'd opened my home and my heart to had been opening my wallet without my knowledge. I didn't go home right away. I drove. Through downtown Cedar Falls, down Main Street, past the frozen river, past the old brick buildings where Claire and I used to get ice cream after church. It was like my body needed to move just to keep my mind from cracking. Eventually, I parked near campus at uni, where Kayla kept her car, my car, in a student lot. The frost on the windshield glimmered under the afternoon sun, and for reasons I still can't explain, I opened the passenger door and checked the glove box. I don't know what I expected. Maybe registration forms, maybe old receipts. What I found instead made my hands shake. A small velvet ring box, old, worn navy blue. It took me half a heartbeat to recognize it. It was the engagement ring box I had bought for Claire 25 years ago, right before she died. The ring had been removed long ago, but the box was personal, sacred almost. I kept it in a drawer at home, what I thought was a safe place. Kayla had taken it, used it, and inside the lid I found a folded Polaroid picture, Kayla holding the empty box up to her face, flashing a peace sign caption written in pen. "Fake proposal pics for Insta LOL." And that would have been that was the moment something hard and cold locked into place inside me. Because the credit cards were one thing, the disrespect at the dinner table was another. But this was erasing the memory of the woman I once loved. This was turning something precious into a prop. I closed the glove box gently, as if the box might break. Then I whispered into the empty car, "Okay, that's enough." I didn't yell, I didn't cry. Midwestern men don't do that. We make plans. And at that moment, mine started forming with perfect clarity. I woke up the next morning before my alarm. Not that I had slept much, maybe an hour, maybe less, but I woke up with a kind of focus I hadn't felt since the day I lost Claire. That same sharp, steady clarity a man gets when he knows there's no going back, only forward. It was 5 a.m. The house was dark, quiet. Lydia and Kayla were still asleep upstairs. I moved through the kitchen without turning on a light, poured myself black coffee, and stood by the window. Outside, Iowa winter wrapped everything in silence. Frost coated the lawn, the driveway, the mailbox. The air looked brittle, like the whole world might crack if you breathed on it too hard. Perfect. At 5:30, I grabbed my coat, the heavy canvas one I'd had since my early 30s, and drove out to the uni dorm parking lot. I checked the registration on Kayla's Civic 3 times the night before, just to be absolutely certain. The car was mine. Legally, fully. That wasn't revenge, that was just paperwork. When I pulled into the student lot, only a few street lamps lit the rows of cars. Most of them were covered in a thin layer of white frost. Steam drifted from a nearby maintenance vent, swirling like smoke in the cold air. My boots crunched on the ice as I approached the Civic. I put the key in the door. The lock clicked loud in the stillness. When the engine turned over, the headlights washed across the snow, bright and clean. Frost curled away from the windshield in delicate patterns. The heater hummed quietly, blowing that first faint breath of warm air. I sat inside, hands on the wheel, and let the silence fill me. A real father would have been thinking about how this might hurt her, but she had made herself very clear. I wasn't her father. 5 minutes later, the dorm entrance burst open. Kayla came running out in pajama pants, hair flying behind her like she'd rolled straight out of bed. She was screaming before she even reached the car. "What are you doing? You can't take my car." I stepped out, calmly closed the door behind me. She skidded to a stop on the ice. "That's my car," she shouted, voice cracking. "No," I said, keeping my tone even. "It's mine. Registered in my name, paid for with my money, driven with my insurance." She shook her head wildly. "You can't just take it. My real dad's in prison. You're all I have." And that was the first honest thing she'd said to me in years. But honesty doesn't erase cruelty. I met her eyes. "Your real dad's in prison," I said quietly, "and your fake dad just got paroled." That broke her. Her mouth trembled. Her face twisted into something between rage and desperation. She stomped her foot, slipped on the ice, caught herself, and screamed again. "You're ruining my life." "No," I said. "I'm stepping out of it." A car door slammed somewhere behind us. Lydia's voice cut through the cold air like a siren. "Mike, what the hell are you doing?" She came jogging across the lot wearing my flannel jacket over her pajamas. Her cheeks were red from the cold, her expression twisted with disbelief and fury. "You can't take her car," she shouted. "She needs it for school." "It's not her car," I said, "and I'm done paying for things I'm not allowed to have a say in." "What does that mean?" she demanded. I looked her dead in the eye. "It means her tuition auto pay turned off, her phone on my plan removed, her car insurance canceled as of 15 minutes ago." Kayla gasped. Lydia looked like she'd been slapped. "You're punishing her," Lydia shrieked. "You're being petty." "No," I said. "I'm being exactly what you told me I am. A checking account with a pulse." "Well, the pulse is still here. The checking part isn't." Neither of them had an answer for that. Lydia dragged Kayla away, muttering angry threats under her breath. I drove home slowly, taking the back roads, letting the heater thaw the stiffness in my fingers. When I pulled into the driveway, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Not victory, not revenge. Just relief. By the time I walked inside, Lydia had already returned. Suitcases were open in the hallway. Clothes spilled onto the floor. Kayla was packing while sobbing loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. Lydia pointed at me like I was a snake she'd found in her pantry. "You're insane," she hissed. "We're staying at my sister's until you get your head right." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. They slammed the door behind them so hard the picture frames rattled. For the first time since my remarriage, the house was silent. A real silence. A peaceful one. I heated leftover chili on the stove, ate it standing up, and watched the steam rise from the pot. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty. I just felt empty. But emptiness can be a good thing. It leaves room for truth. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something nudged me to answer. "Mr. Harrison," an older male voice asked. "This is Bob Jensen from Black Hawk Credit Union." My grip tightened on the phone. "Evening, Bob. Everything okay?" There was a pause, a heavy one. "We've been reviewing the accounts you flagged earlier," he said. "And, well, some of what we found isn't just suspicious. It's potentially criminal." My breath caught. "What did you find?" "I'd rather go over it in person," he said gently. "But I need you to come in sometime this week. We've discovered multiple accounts linked to your social security number. Some opened under your name, some under Lydia's, and a few under someone else's." Someone else's. The words hit like a cold wind. Then he added quietly, "Mike, we think this might qualify as identity fraud, level that requires legal action." The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. I swallowed. "All right, Bob, I'll come in tomorrow." "One more thing," he said. "Don't confront them yet. Let us handle this properly." I let out a slow, controlled breath. "Don't worry," I said. "I don't plan on confronting anyone." Because by then I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was focused. Crystal clear. And that's far more dangerous. When I hung up, I walked to the front window. Snow drifted softly under the streetlights. The Civic sat in my driveway, quiet and still. A part of me wanted to be done, to stop there, to let life take its course. But life had no intention of stopping. Not after everything I just learned. The truth was unfolding now, piece by piece, and there was nothing left to do but follow it all the way to the end. Bob Jensen called me first thing the next morning. I'd known Bob for 25 years, back when his beard was still red instead of gray, and he wore the same pair of suspenders every day of the week. He was the kind of Iowa man you trusted without thinking about it. The kind who'd help dig your truck out of a snowbank at 6 a.m. without expecting a thank you. So when he said, "Come in as soon as you can, Mike," I didn't waste time. The drive to Blackhawk Credit Union was quiet. Frost clung to the grass, and the sky had that pale gray look Iowa gets before the weather turns. When I stepped inside, the warm air smelled like burnt coffee and copier ink. Bob was waiting for me near his office. He didn't smile. "Morning," he said, voice low. "Let's talk in the back." I followed him into a small conference room. A stack of papers sat on the table, thick enough to stop a bullet. Bob closed the door before speaking. "Mike, I hate to say this, but things are worse than we thought." He slid the stack toward me. "These aren't just unauthorized charges. These are accounts, plural, opened under your name with forged signatures. We also found activity on a credit line opened under Lydia's name, but funded with your information." I thumbed through the paperwork. My name printed where I never wrote it. Transactions I never approved. Digital signatures I'd never made. "How long has this been going on?" I asked quietly. "Looks like at least 16 months. Maybe longer." He exhaled. "Mike, this is identity fraud, clear as day." I stared at the documents, each one a punch to the gut. And the worst part, the part that hollowed out my chest, was that it wasn't just Lydia. Some of the accounts listed a secondary user. Kayla Thompson. Bob cleared his throat gently. "We'll need to open a formal case. It'll go before a judge. But I want you to know something." He leaned back in his chair, eyes softening. "I've known you since you were 29. I've watched you sign every mortgage, every truck loan, every savings certificate. You've never been late on a payment, never acted dishonest. You're one of the most decent men in Blackhawk County, and you don't deserve this." His voice cracked just a little on the last word. I nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. When I finally did, the words came out low, steady, controlled. "What do you need me to do?" He handed me a pen. "Sign these, then let the system work." 2 weeks later, Lydia served me with legal papers. She wanted a hearing, claimed I had financially abused her daughter by cutting off Kayla's car college payments and phone. Claims of emotional harm and domestic financial pressure. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so predictable. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning at the Blackhawk County Courthouse, a tall beige building with pillars and cold marble floors that echoed with every step. I arrived early wearing my best jacket, the navy one Claire once picked out for me. When Lydia and Kayla walked in, they looked confident. Kayla held her phone like she was live streaming the whole thing. Lydia wore a red dress that might have looked better if it weren't for the smug smile plastered across her face. Her lawyer, a younger guy with gelled hair and a briefcase that looked too expensive, immediately strutted over. "Mr. Harrison," he said, offering a handshake I didn't take. "We're confident the court will see how harmful your actions were to this young woman." I looked past him at Kayla. She rolled her eyes, same as always. When the courtroom doors opened, we filed in. Lydia sat on one side with her lawyer. I sat alone on the other. But not for long. Because when the judge called the session to order, another figure walked through the side door and took a seat beside me. Bob, in his best church suit, holding another thick folder of documents. Lydia's smile evaporated. Her lawyer blinked. Who is that?" Bob answered before I could. "I'm here as a witness, Your Honor." The judge nodded. "Please proceed, Mr. Jensen." Bob stood, cleared his throat, and addressed the entire courtroom. "I've known Mike Harrison for 25 years. I've personally overseen every loan and account he's ever opened with us. This is a man who has never missed a payment, never lied, and never taken advantage of anyone." He paused, letting the words settle. But he was taken advantage of. Repeatedly. Lydia's face drained of color. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Objection." "Overruled," the judge said sharply. "Continue, Mr. Jensen." Bob opened the folder and lifted a stack of papers. These accounts were opened using Mr. Harrison's social security number. These signatures are forged. These credit lines were taken out in his name and used for purchases including hotels, luxury goods, travel expenses, and direct transfers to Ms. Kayla Thompson. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Bob wasn't done. "I'd also like to present these screenshots." He held up photos taken from Ms. Thompson's public Instagram account. They show her posing with an engagement ring box Mr. Harrison bought for his late wife, a deeply personal item taken without permission. Kayla gasped. Lydia covered her mouth. The judge turned slowly toward them. Ms. Thompson, she said, voice icy, is this true? Kayla stammered. I didn't know it was his dead wife's. You stole from a grieving man, the judge snapped. Sit down. Lydia reached out to steady her daughter, her hands trembling. She started whispering frantically something about misunderstandings, exaggerations, mistakes, but the damage was already done. The judge turned her full attention to Lydia. Mrs. Thompson, you opened fraudulent credit lines under Mr. Harrison's name, used his financial identity illegally, and allowed your daughter to benefit from these crimes. You then attempted to portray him as abusive. Lydia shook her head desperately. Your Honor, I can't explain. But the judge was already reading the ruling. I find Mr. Harrison free of all liability. All debts incurred under these fraudulent accounts are the responsibility of Mrs. Thompson. Furthermore, I recommend this matter be forwarded for further review by law enforcement. Lydia's knees buckled. Literally. She collapsed into the chair behind her, gasping for breath. Her lawyer reached out to steady her, but she swatted him away. Kayla just stared at the floor, hands shaking. I watched it unfold without smiling, without flinching. I didn't need to. The truth was doing the work. Bob leaned toward me and whispered, You did good, Mike. Maybe, maybe not. But what I did feel was something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Freedom. When the judge dismissed the hearing, Lydia tried to approach me. Mike, please wait. But I just shook my head and walked past her. She had taken enough from me. Now she was losing only what she had stolen. And that wasn't revenge. That was justice. When I walked out of the courthouse that morning, the air felt different. Lighter, cleaner. Like the cold Iowa wind had finally blown the weight off my shoulders instead of right through me. I stood at the top of the courthouse steps for a moment, staring out at the quiet streets of downtown Waterloo, watching cars drift past the old brick buildings and the frozen river just beyond them. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a man who was holding something together with both hands. I felt like a man who could finally let go. Bob clapped me gently on the back. You need anything, Mike, you call me. You hear? I hear, I said. He nodded once, gave me that small, reassuring smile older Midwestern men use instead of full-blown emotion, and walked off toward his truck. I stood there a little longer, letting the February air sting my cheeks. It felt good, honest, a reminder that I was still here, still standing. The house felt different after Lydia and Kayla were gone. Quieter, almost too quiet at first. No footsteps upstairs, no slamming doors, no perfume cloud in the hallway that made me sneeze. Just the sound of the furnace kicking on every so often and the soft hum of the refrigerator. For a few weeks, I kept thinking I'd hear Lydia's voice float downstairs or see Kayla's purse tossed on the counter like she owned the place. But the silence eventually softened, turned warm, familiar. I realized it was the same kind of silence I'd lived in with Claire, the kind that held space for peace instead of chaos. I started cooking again, real meals, not just microwaved leftovers or sandwiches eaten standing over the sink. I fixed the loose drawer in the kitchen and rehung the picture frames that had rattled when Lydia slammed the door on her way out. I sharpened my tools, cleaned the garage, and took slow walks around the neighborhood in the evenings. One Saturday morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove out to Hawkeye Downs Auto Auction in Cedar Rapids, not looking for anything specific, just browsing, I told myself. But I knew exactly what I was hoping to find. And I did. Tucked between a rusted Chevy and a too shiny Dodge was a 1998 Ford F-150 dark forest green regular cab. The same year, same model, same color my dad drove when I was a kid. The paint was faded. The windshield had a chip. The bed was scratched from years of hauling lumber or tools or maybe just time itself. But when I opened the driver's door and slid inside, the seat let out that familiar sigh, the same one my father's truck used to make when he'd settle in after a long day at the shop. The vinyl smelled like sun-warmed plastic and old gasoline. It felt like sitting in a memory, one I didn't realize I needed back. The auctioneer raised an eyebrow when I started bidding. You sure you want that old thing, Mike? Yeah, I said softly. I'm sure. I won the truck for a lot less than I expected. Drove it home with the window cracked and the radio playing some old country song I hadn't heard since Claire was alive. The sun hit the chipped paint just right, and for a few minutes the world felt simple again. A few weeks later, I started volunteering with a group from First Lutheran older folks who fixed up homes for widows and seniors who couldn't do the repairs themselves. Gutters, porch rails, loose steps, Broken fence posts, nothing fancy, just the kind of work a good community steps in to handle. It gave me something steady to pour myself into. Something that wasn't pain, something that wasn't loss, something that reminded me of who I was before everything got tangled with Lydia and Kayla. And every time I pulled up in that old F-150, the group would smile. That's a real truck, someone would say, or brings back memories. I'd nod, me too. One afternoon after replacing a widow's broken screen door, I sat in the truck and realized something simple but important. I wasn't angry anymore, not even a little. Not at Kayla, not at Lydia, not even at myself. The storm had passed and all that was left was quiet. Good quiet. Then in early June, just as the cornfields were turning bright green and the humidity was creeping in, I got a letter. Not a text, not an email, a real letter, envelope, handwritten name, Cedar Falls postmark, from Kayla. I held it for a long while before opening it. My thumb brushed the seal. My chest felt tight in a way I couldn't name. Finally, I pulled out the folded paper. Her handwriting was messier than I remembered. It said, "Mike, I graduated last week. I walked across the stage thinking you'd be there. You weren't. And for the first time, I understood why. I thought you owed me things. Money, a car, a life I didn't earn. Mom always said you would provide no matter what. I believed her. But she never told me who you really were. A good man, a quiet man, a man who tried harder than we ever deserved. I'm not asking forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. Kayla." I folded the letter slowly, pressing the crease with my thumb. It didn't hurt me. It didn't heal me either. It just settled something. She had learned something the hard way. Life has a way of teaching lessons no parent or step-parent ever could. I placed the letter in a drawer beside the old engagement ring box, where it wouldn't bother me but wouldn't be forgotten either. A reminder that even broken relationships can echo with truth once the shouting stops. A week after that, Lydia tried to call me. Her number popped up twice, then 3 times, then a text. "Please, just talk to me." But I didn't. Not out of bitterness, out of wisdom. Some chapters are meant to close. Some doors aren't supposed to open again. And some people only learn who you are once you walk away. Now, most days my life is quiet in the way a good life is supposed to be. I wake early, make coffee. Sometimes I drive the old F-150 out to the river park by the water and watch the sun climb over the trees. Other times I help the church group fix someone's porch or patch a roof. Folks bring me pie after we finish their repairs. I never turn down pie. And every once in a while, when someone asks me about Lydia or Kayla, I shrug and say, "In Iowa, we don't get mad. We get even quietly." Because that's the truth. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I didn't destroy their world. I just turned off the lights and walked back into mine. If you've ever carried more than your share, if you've ever been taken for granted, if you've ever had to rebuild from the quiet up, just know this, you're not alone, and your story isn't over either. Thanks for listening, and if my story meant something to you, stick around for the next one. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the strongest truths.